Colorado good, Stanford not so good? Are the Cardinal and the Buffs switching roles this season? Mark Rogers TV talking some Pac-12 football with Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree. And my goodness, Nick, if you go to Vegas and they usually know what they're talking about, this is pretty much a coin flip, and the game's at Stanford.
Yeah, I think everyone's just a little bit thrown off because, like you said, I don't think anyone saw Colorado playing this well this year. All of the coaches in their pregame press conferences have said, "Oh, no, we saw this in Colorado last year. They were super close and they were talented. They just couldn't finish games. We totally saw this coming." I doubt they did, but they seem to have come out of left field. Stanford, on the other hand, a lot of people had them thinking, like, if they could probably get by Washington, they'd go back to the Pac-12 championship game. That is completely off the table, barring some sort of epic collapse. Their offense just looks absolutely anemic. So in any other scenario, I think everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, Stanford at home against Washington, that's a comfortable win," right? But I don't think you can say that now, and I don't think Vegas knows what to do with it. I don't think the computers know what to do with it. And I think everybody's kind of gut feeling is off now. Like, can Colorado really beat Stanford? That doesn't seem right. But yeah, I think they absolutely could beat Stanford.
So for most of us, Nick, that just love college football, we check out the traditional standings. But for some people, the standings against the spread are a little bit more important. And if you go by those, Colorado's better than Alabama. They're the number one team in the country.
Yeah, I think I believe the Buffaloes are 7-0 against the spread, which is pretty impressive. I can't help but wonder how much of that is again, just our expectations, the public's expectations, thinking, the Buffaloes just aren't that good and they're better than the public expectations. I don't know. If you're taking gambling advice from me, I would strongly suggest you get some help. I mean that in multiple ways, actually, now that I think about it. But 7-0, I think it's just a lot of its expectations, and Colorado keeps surpassing them. I think I last read it's a 2-point differential with Vegas, so it's going to be the Buffs are going to have to win this game, or I guess lose by 1 if they're going to go to 8-0. But they keep surpassing expectations. I guess what do they do now that we're not really sure what to expect from them? They keep winning, but it just doesn't seem like it should happen. Honestly, I think you bet when a team's hot like that, you bet on them until they give you a reason not to.
Colorado's current performance this season may have finally eclipsed, in the eyes of Vegas, its long-standing reputation, because last week a 12-point favorite against Arizona State, and I, for one, jumped on that and thought, my goodness, Colorado, I know that they're heavily improved. They went to the Big House and took Michigan to a third-quarter ball game, 3-point game. They went to USC, played a really good game. They've won some big games against Oregon and the like, but I just didn't see them defeating Arizona State, and they blew the doors off the Sun Devils like 40-16. So this is going to be a real struggle for Stanford to stay. We got to think at this point, Washington's the prohibitive favorite by a huge margin, probably more so than any division leader in college football at this point. They've got a stranglehold on it to a certain extent, at least in terms of perception of how good they are. So Stanford's sitting at 2-2 in the Pac-12. Colorado with a real chance to do something big in the South Division. They could be muddled up with all sorts of tiebreakers in play by the end of this thing. So when you start to size this one up, Nick, let's start with the Stanford offense. What do the Cardinal need to do?
They got to be able to run the ball. They have to be able to run the ball, which means their offensive line is going to have to get some push. Now, the potentially unfortunate thing is that they still don't know if McCaffrey is going to play or not yet. Shaw says he's going to work him out on Friday, see if he can make some cuts and do the things he needs to do to be safe out there and to make the plays he needs to make. He did not play against Notre Dame, but Bryce Love came in and moved the ball very well. Now, there's the huge caveat there is that the Notre Dame defense is awful, I think is the nicest thing you can say about it. And they still only got one rushing touchdown, kind of hovered around 100 yards, if I recall correctly. So it wasn't a great rushing day. but they've got to be able to run the ball. That gives them a couple of advantages. One, their banged up second defense stays off the field longer, which is where you want to be. And two, it helps them open up the pass, which they've struggled with the pass, which generally comes with a new quarterback in a running game that is kind of non-existent lately. So they've got to run the football. They've got to run that like old style, like we're going to control the clock for 40 minutes and let you hope for the best. The good news for them is that the USC ran the ball very well against Colorado, and USC's line was probably the most disappointing unit in all of college football. I believe Phil Steele said they were the best offensive line in the country, or at least the Pac-12. They did not play like that for the first month of this season, not even close, certainly not against Alabama. Oh, wow. And they came out and rushed the ball very well. I think they had 190 yards as a team against Colorado. So hopefully Stanford can get the rush going or get the run going. If they can, they have more options. If they cannot, Colorado's probably going to run it up on them.
We saw a Stanford defense in the secondary that was completely exposed by Jake Browning and company in the debacle on that Friday night in Seattle. And then last week against Washington State, who's going to expose most teams in the secondary, but obviously Stanford losing its two corners for a significant amount of time, that was a huge issue. In Colorado, they've got a veteran quarterback. The kid's a dual threat, and they've got playmakers. People don't know about them at this point, but running back who ran for over 240 yards or something like that against Arizona State last week, and some wide receivers that can do some serious damage.
Yeah, they've got three just really elite wide receivers for Colorado. I think all of them are averaging at least one first down per catch. And by that, I mean they've got a guy who has like 18 yards per catch, another one at like 15, and another one at 13 per touch. Every time these guys, on average, when these guys touch the football, you get a first down. And they've got three of them. That's pretty impressive. The other thing is Luafau, the quarterback for Colorado. He's back. He's healthy. He can move the ball with his legs, but he's not really a rushing quarterback. He is much better. He's more of a threat when he throws, and he likes to throw better. But if you get him off his spot, you rush the pocket, you get it muddy, he can move the ball with his legs. So the challenge is going to be A, containing those three really talented wide receivers. B, the normal way you do that is to have good defensive back play and then get pressure on the quarterback to make him throw a bad pass. So they have to do that, but then they also have to have good contain, because this guy can move the ball on his feet or with his feet. And so if you don't contain him, all the rushing in the world isn't going to matter if he can just slip through for, 8 to 10 yards every time that you get pressure on him. So they have to have good defensive back play. They've got at least one of their good top corners back, Quentin Meeks. And then they're going to have to get Solomon Thomas and the rest of the D-line getting in pressure. And then they're really going to need their linebackers, who have not showed up at all this year. That is a unit absolutely desperately missing Blake Martinez. They're going to need help from them on contain to keep this guy in the pocket and get pressure on him. Quentin Meeks is a great defensive back, but he can't cover all three of these elite wide receivers. So they've got to get their linebackers going to help with contain, to help with pressure. They have not had that this year. So that's a huge red flag. So I would expect Colorado to be able to move the ball very well if those linebackers don't step up. And Stanford's probably going to have to keep this Colorado team to under 20 points, because that's about how much on average Stanford's scoring on offense. So to do that, you're really going to need the linebackers to step up and help. Otherwise, I just don't think they'll have enough to slow this Colorado team down.
If Stanford loses this game, of course, and they drop to 4-3, then it's starting to look at like one of those Foster Farms Bowl kind of seasons like they had a few years ago with 5 losses, while Colorado, as we mentioned, could advance to 4-1 and set themselves up for some huge games against the big boys in the Pac-12 South with just the one loss against USC. So with Vegas undecided for the most part on this one, Nick, do you have a feel?
You know,
Because I don't.
Yeah, I'm genuinely concerned by the fact that they only scored 8 offensive points against Notre Dame. Literally everyone else Notre Dame has played against outside of a hurricane has put up like 30 plus. And not necessarily elite defenses. Like Michigan State put up 36 on them. I think Syracuse had 33. Texas, I think, got to 50. Stanford got to 8 offensive points. They had 9 defensive points. Quentin Meeks, their defensive back, was the best offensive player for Stanford with his pick 6. That concerns me that you can only get 8 offensive points against Notre Dame. I'm not even sure you're going to be able to get to 21 on Colorado if that's the case, especially that high-powered Arizona State offense only put up, what'd you say, 16 against Colorado?
Yep.
So now you've got this struggling. I think right now my gut's telling me Colorado takes this. I don't know by how much, but I think Colorado should be able to win. They're just playing better football right now. Having said that,
Nick, I was just going to say that I'm going to guess that Stanford's still a stronger team in the trenches, but Colorado just has it working, especially on offense between quarterback, running backs, and wide receivers. And I think, obviously, for those guys to put up the kind of points and numbers that they are improved along the offensive front to make it happen to that point. Maybe not dominant, but good enough to put together 4 or 5 drives a game.
Yeah. I will say, though, as much as Stanford has struggled on the O-line, every time in the last 2 seasons I've picked against Stanford, they've come out and shoved it down my throat. I actually had Notre Dame winning last week pretty comfortably because I thought there's just no way that they'll be – if they can't score a ton of points on Notre Dame, then Notre Dame's just going to blow them out, right? Because Notre Dame is nothing but offense. They came out and just said, nope, wrong. Quentin Meeks, here's a pick 6 and a safety, and why not a Bryce Love touchdown? So I think Colorado should win. But every time I've picked Stanford to lose, they've proved me wrong. So take it for what it's worth. But I'm sort of where the computers in Vegas are. Like, not a lot about this makes sense. But if I step back, Colorado's playing better football right now, this moment. Let's go with them.
So take the better field goal kicker in this one. Maybe that's what it's going to come down to.
Oh, man. Poor Conrad Ucaprina. That guy keeps hitting the goalpost, just direct shot right into the post, the Stanford kicker. I don't even know if you could plan that if you tried to. So I don't know what's going on with that guy, but like, not only does he keep missing, but he keeps hitting exactly the ball right on the goalpost. He's done that 3 or 4 times in the last couple games. I don't know how that's possible. I feel bad for the kid because he's normally so constant, but man, yeah, take the better kicker.
All right, so it's Colorado at Stanford, and improbably it's Stanford most likely at 4-2, currently 2-2 in the Pac-12, vying for second division status among the bowl slotting, while Colorado could advance to 4-1, set themselves up nicely with more than half of the Pac-12 slate behind them to vie for gulp, a Pac-12 championship game spot.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and say it now. The most random Pac-12 championship game, I'm actually fingers crossed for, Colorado and Washington State. Just get them in there, and let's just confuse everyone. Let's just get real weird with it. Let's let ESPN figure out what to do with that. I'm looking forward to it.
That would be beautiful. All right, Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree helping us break down the improbable Buffs trying to vie for another win in the Pac-12, taking on Stanford in Palo Alto. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Anytime, Mark.